Liz. Thanks for being on the podcast today. I'm laughing because the way that we got in here is quite remarkable. I feel like we should get a trophy for the fastest podcasters in the world.
You texted me like 40 minutes ago, and we are recording this. So here we are. I like it.
I literally was like, hey, do you think in the next... I will say that I did a month ago say something.
You did.
And then I was like, hey,
it's more on me.
What do you think, Thursday or Friday? And you're like, how about in 27 minutes? I'm like, Oh my gosh, yes, I will get home in 27 minutes and get this sucker. And look at us.
And here we are. Here we are.
Okay, everyone, if you do not know Liz is lovely. I really want you to make sure that you watch the video of Liz because now we're on YouTube, Liz. We have all of our things on. Yeah. But it's so much more fun to watch Liz in person because she's animated and she's so cute. I think you need to watch this. So our listeners, make sure you're watching this. So Liz is the founder of Sseko. She is the Chief Growth Officer of Noonday Collection, which I have so many things, Noonday. She's a podcaster, the Plucking Up podcast, which is one of my favorites. And then she wrote a book called Beginner's Pluck. And what I think is so impressive, one of the 20 most... top 20 speaker in the nation, which is so cool. I love that you're a woman, and I love that you're young and you have a family and you got little boys and you're crushing it in the workforce too. So I just think it's great, and I'm so happy to have you.
Oh, thanks, Kristi. It's really good to reconnect. Isn't that the best part about having a podcast, is you just kind of have an excuse to prioritize interesting conversations with people that you like, which is what I feel like I'm doing right now. So thanks for having me.
It's so fun. I was on with Tony Collier last month, and we were just like, it was like having an old girlfriend. Like, oh my gosh, I probably won't see you, I won't see your face again for another year, but like it feels like we're old friends, which I love.
I love it.
I love it. Okay, so for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about where you live, what's happening right now. Like the fact that your mic is maybe on a diaper and I'm in my daughter's. This is my favorite part. Liz is like, oh my gosh, Kristi, are you in a studio? And I was like, oh yes, do I look like I'm in a studio? And then I like turned my little camera. This is the beautiful word of Instagram. Like everyone would be like, oh my gosh, look at her podcast studio. And then they would turn the camera and see that I'm in my daughter's bunk room with like literally crap is everywhere on the ground. So tell me about you, Liz. What's going on with you? Where are you? What's your life look like?
Ooh-wee. It's been a few years.
I know, right?
So as you mentioned, kind of who am I on a meta level? I'm a serial entrepreneur, but make the world better. So maybe some people would call that a social entrepreneur, meaning I care less about building businesses to make profit and money, which you kind of have to do. No margin, no mission, but things that bring about work and goodness in the world. And I'm also a community builder, is something that I am just realizing, hindsight's 20/20. But as I look back over the last 15 years of my vocational life, but really even longer than that of just kind of being an adult, I build community wherever I go. And so whether that is in kind of a proximate neighborhood setting or whether that is through my businesses, community and connection have been kind of a core to my business. Or now I'm in a season where I'm doing that both for myself, my family, the businesses that I'm a part of. I'm doing more kind of consulting and coaching work. And I had this realization, honestly, I was on a walk this morning. I've been walking in the woods for about an hour in the morning, which is really a life changer.
Lovely.
And not listening to anything, which is a big deal for me because I have a long list of things. I love information and I love consuming things. So the quiet has been really interesting. And a revelation that I had this morning was about the word co, which is Latin for with or together. And so just thinking, I'm like, here are the things that I love. I love community. I love connection. I love actually conflict. I don't love conflict. I like it, but I actually think it's really important. And I love it in the sense of like doing conflict well and helping people navigate having conflict or hard conversations is really interesting and important to me. I love co-founders and co-leaders. And so anything really, I feel like communication, anything that starts with this word co, which is collaboration, which means jointly or together is really what my passion is. How are we doing life together? How does my story interact with and impact your story, and how can we do that in a way that helps you become more of who you were created to be, unlocks me to be the same, and then together we are creating a brighter future and a brighter world. That's kind of who I am.
I love that. We're very similar in this because I don't want to do anything by myself. I always say team. I don't know if it's because I grew up in sports teams and I love team, but in everything, I want it to be we. Like anytime I do something, I want it to be we because there's so much power in that. Tell me a little bit, and we're talking today, for those of you who are listening, just about building community. And I think people talk about this a lot, but I think you talk about it in a way that is so very specific. But I want to ask you, when was it in your life that community became kind of that thing for you, that you knew that you really couldn't be impactful unless you had community around you or you built community?
I think like so many of our stories, my story probably really started with a really distinct deficit and longing. I think I grew up in a world where I didn't have a strong sense of place, sense of community, sense of connection. My family was not a very stable place for me, so I lacked that kind of like I just am a part of a community within the walls of my home. And then on top of that, we lived in just your classic suburbia, like middle class suburbia, where not only are you allowed to, but you're kind of rewarded for hiding, and just kind of like, I just remember in so many experiences early on where I was like, I think my job is to just make it make it seem like we've got it going on. Like we've got it together. Like that feels like the kind of the highest purpose is you save face, make sure the neighbors think you're okay and you're this pretty little family. And we were a pretty little family, but inside it was not pretty. It was not pretty, and no one knew. And so there was a lot of hiding, and I grew up learning that's what you do. You hide your stuff. And so I think for me, from an early age, it was less of, wow, I grew up with this really strong sense of community or an innate ability to build community. It was actually the opposite. And so I think, though, sometimes what happens when we have a deficit, right, is like I had early on realized like, if I want this and I have a desire for this, you got to go build it for yourself, which is, a whole different story. And it's not what I want for my kids, but oftentimes it is. It is what we lacked and where our deepest kind of pain was that required us to have a different level of kind of intentionality and resiliency. And so pretty early on, I really indexed a lot on friendship because I think I knew innately like, and I say that, and it's like I started building community in high school, and even still, I was totally hiding. Like my family was the hot mess express at a school. I had all these friends that had these beautiful families and really healthy relationships, which on the one hand, I really just in hindsight see what a blessing that was, that I saw what like a functioning, loving, committed, stable family unit looked like. I got to observe it because I was a visitor, but then it also created a ton of shame where it was like, I can't be the only one, and I really did feel like I was the only one. So it was like, you got to hide. You cannot ever let, people know what you're going through or what it is that you lack. But even during that, going like, okay, I'm not going to get it here. And I'm not naturally getting into my neighborhood, which was just like a classic suburban neighborhood where like nobody knew their neighbors and everybody kind of kept to themselves. And so I started pretty early on, I think, asking these questions of how do we build relationships and community and connection. And even though I couldn't do it at the time because I was still too afraid and the cost felt too high, I think I knew deep down that a core part of true community was being known and was not being in hiding. And so I think I've been asking these questions for a long time. Was a really long way of answering your question.
No, I think that is, I think that's so probably many who hear this, but I think the step that we probably don't take is, and the one thing that I hear you say a lot, which I actually love it because it's kind of like this kind way to challenge people when they say like, oh, well, I just don't have community. And I've moved, I think 8 times. This is like our 8th move. So you have to build community in every single place. It gets exhausting. Like I remember this last move and I'm like, I'm just kind of done. Like I don't want to pursue anymore. Like I'm always the pursuer. Like I'm done. Like I just want someone to pursue me. And what I found is like, that can happen, but if I really want the deep community that I want, I have to pursue it. And one of the things that you talk about a lot when you speak is like you have to take responsibility if you want it. So tell me a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about that, because I feel like it's a big kick in the butt, but also like in a kind way that says like, well, if you want this, there are ways to do this.
You know, being pursued or finding community, that's something that I think a lot of people think is that it exists. I just have to find it, and then I have to get into that circle, and then I'll feel a sense of belonging.
Oh,
And if that happens to
let
you,
me stop you there. That, what you just said, finding community, and you think that you just will find it and go belong. Oh, that's so good. Yes, that's all
you
of
know,
us.
C.S.
Yes.
Lewis like talks a lot about kind of the danger of the longing for the inner ring. That there is this kind of innate sense. So if you feel this and if you've done this, one thing that I do want to say is like give yourself grace, because this is like part of being a human.
Well,
this
all
isn't
of
like
us
a
have
you
done
problem.
this.
It's all of us.
Yeah.
But that we really get in our head, and that there is this sense of like there's an inner ring somewhere, and I just have to find it, and then they have to open the door, and then my seat's in there and it's ready for me to be occupied. They just have to let me in. I have to find it, and then I will feel a sense of belonging. Then I will be known. Then this deep ache and longing for connection and for pursuit will be met. And the reality is, if you are looking for it, you're probably never going to find it. If you are looking to be pursued and you're waiting, it's probably not going to happen. It might. And if it does, I would say treat it like you won the lottery. Like winning the lottery is like an amazing, cool thing. It's not a great personal finance strategy. You know, like if you're like, well, in the long run, I just want to have like healthy finances and be able to pay my bills and not be stressed out. No one would be like, you should just hope you win the lottery. You know, it's like, okay, if that happens, treat it like the magnificent blessing that it is. But know that for most of us, what it means is if you want it, you have to build it. And that belonging is also kind of an inside job. Like you can't leapfrog over intimacy. Like there's no circle. There's no circle that has a seat waiting for you. Like how you get intimacy and belonging is actually just like a series of kind of steps and stages and investment and showing up. Like you have to build the seat.
And inviting
there is no,
in.
you can't just sit in the seat and then be like, now this is belonging. And so, but so many of us, I mean, 70% of people are lonely. Like less than 1 out of every 5 moms in America would say that they have a community they really believe that they can trust with their faults and their weaknesses. Men are 5 times lonelier in friendship than they were in 1990. We are living in the midst of what the Surgeon General is calling a loneliness epidemic, saying that the degree of loneliness and isolation that Americans are experiencing is more dangerous to our physical health, not even just our mental health, but like our physical health. It is as dangerous as diabetes, as obesity, as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Harvard Medical School released the results of the longest ever study done on human wellness and health and longevity, and found that the single greatest predictor of how long someone will live and how happy they will be was the quality of their warm connections in their relationships, and even specifically friendships. So it goes outside. We need more than our nuclear families to feel a sense of support. And we certainly need more than our romantic partners or spouses to feel a true sense of like, I'm a part of a dense network of support. And but so first of all, what I want to say is if you're experiencing that, if you're like, I don't have the support that I need to thrive, one, you are not alone. Right. This is not a you problem. Yep. This is an us problem, right? It's a macro cultural problem, and we could spend hours talking about what that was and when it started happening and how it's accelerating. So on the one hand, it is a cultural problem, but on the other hand, yes, the only way we're going to solve it is if more of us than not start to take personal responsibility. Like you're not responsible for what culture did that made it so hard to experience this, but you are responsible to yourself for creating a different path forward for yourself, for your family. And so usually that means you got to go first. You got to go first. And it's like anything else. This is what I like. Friendship is such a weird thing in America. Because we have all of these bizarre ideas about how it's just like kismet and it's chemistry. And, you know, it's interesting that like when the show Friends starts, like we just start out with all of them kind of living together in some way. There's no like, but how? How did we get there? Right. You know? And so friendship and relationships really isn't that magical. It's actually just like everything else in our life. Like you would never in a million years be like, I have a strong, deep desire to get in shape. Like the moment you say, I want to get in shape, the next thought that you have is like, so I probably need to get a gym membership. I need to put it on my calendar. Like how many hours a week do I need to invest in this? Like no one is just like, I have this strong, deep desire to be more healthy physically. And maybe it'll happen to me. No, no one is like, I have a goal that in the next 5 years we're building my dream house, right? Okay, so what do? You're going to start saving, you're going to start investing, you are going to hire an architect, you're going to start working with a real estate agent. You're going to take all of these action steps so that 10 years from now, you are living in your dream home, and friendships and relationships and community are no different. Like it takes time and it takes effort and it takes investment. And sometimes it can feel like wasted time and effort, which can be really discouraging, right? Where it's like people are like, well, I tried that once. And you're like, oh, well, that's like somebody that's really out of shape being like, I tried once 5 years ago to get in shape and it didn't work. So I guess it's just not for me. Or like, don't tell me to work harder because I've tried and it didn't work. So honestly, just reframing it into being like, are you consistent with it? Do you prioritize it? Do you sacrifice for it? Is it on your calendar? If I were to look at your bank statements and your calendar, would I see that you've made a significant investment in community and connection? And if the answer is no, it's kind of like you're probably living in the land where you're going, I'm waiting for it to happen to me, versus having a sense of agency and being empowered to build it.
I think one of the things that has exasperated this probably is social media. Like I think about when you say, we just want to find it. And if we were just in that group, if we were in the inner circle, and then up pops social media and we're looking and we see, that these people did this. I mean, when I'm hosting something or doing something, I'm like, I hope no one feels, left out, or that they would want to be a part of it. And if they do want to be a part of it, I wish they would reach out to me. So next time they can be a part of it. Tell me about like, how has social media kind of exasperated this epidemic?
Yeah, so a lot of people really point to the pandemic and the shutdown and social distancing is kind of like the point where this epidemic started. And the reality is we see the clearest correlation in this spike of loneliness and this kind of epidemic of loneliness in America around 2011, 2012 is when the trend really started accelerating. And that is also when about 50% of Americans had smartphones and started using social media. So there was a tipping point culturally where people were spending their lives on a device and on social media. And that is like, when you look at the graph, you just literally see it's like 50% penetration of smartphone and social media usage. And at the almost exact same rate, you start seeing kind of rising instances of isolation. So is it all like, can we blame social media for all of it? No. We live in a culture and it's complex and it's dynamic and there's so many different factors. And, America at large was really founded on some core beliefs of individualism and of independence, of privacy, of safety. I think convenience is probably the thing that of all of kind of the cultural values that we hold, that's probably keeping us from one another. Like we just choose convenience, and we are so socialized at this point for it that the cost feels really high. Yeah. And doing life on your own has just been, it's possible in a way that it wasn't possible, even 5 years ago. It's like you don't need to ask a friend for a ride from the airport. That's what Uber and Lyft is for. Yes. Not only does it make it easier for you to get home from the airport, it actually makes it harder for you to ask a friend to come pick you up, because now we kind of have this thing that you have access to it. Just like you have a smartphone, Kristi, like you can download Lyft and get a ride. Right. So there is this additional kind of social, relational, psychological pressure that exists because we can take care of ourselves. We can meet our own needs in a way that is more convenient and available than ever. And of course, that is just like one example. And so the story that we tell ourselves, right, is like, well, if I can figure it out on my own, I should. And what we're missing is the dense network of support and the muscle that gets built when the norm is that we ask for help and that we receive help. And that is like part of the fabric of our relationships. And so, so many of us are like, are you kidding? If my friend called me and needed help, I would drop everything. And, like it's kind of this like grandiose thing of like, of course, if my friend needed help, I would do that. And we envisioned some big emergency or some big thing or some big way that our friends need us to show up for them. But the reality is, if on a daily basis, really daily, weekly at least, we're not practicing in the smaller ways, asking for help and not waiting until we need it and we have no other options. You know, in my neighborhood, we use Slack to communicate. And just last week, one of our community members put out a Slack. And she was like, hey, is anybody free to watch the girls from, it was like an hour and a half, you know, from 4 to 5:30. I really need Michael's been working a lot and I want to go on a long run. That was the word she used. I want to go on a long run. And I looked at my calendar and was immediately like, I'm good. We're good. And listen, the reality is when you have 3 kids, adding 2 more in is like not hard. It really isn't. Like the cost is just like, especially when you've structured your life like we have, there was no cost. We're not driving 20 minutes across town. It's literally like you live down the block, drop the girls off on your way to your run. But what stuck out to me about the request was there was no sense of like, this is an emergency. Like, you know, this kid needs to go to the doctor and my husband is working. And so everybody could see, like, this is a need. It was actually a want. It was like, I want to go on a long run and my husband's working a lot. And I just remember being like, I am so grateful that you asked and that you felt the freedom to ask for a want, not a need. Because I think the story we tell ourselves is like, you have to exhaust every last option before you can ask for help. And that's actually what leads us to being so unhealthy, so lonely, anxious, afraid, depressed, isolated, is because we had this standard of like, before I can ask for help, I have to there were 19 hoops I had to try to figure it out and prove it to you. And even prove it was a need versus going like, I want to go on a run. Can anybody watch my kids? And when that is normalized, that you don't have to be in a depths of despair place to ask for help. What is actually happening is you're building this social fabric and this muscle and this kind of social agreement that then when the thing that really is desperate, that really is hard to ask for, that really is a big deal, asking for it becomes second nature because you've been building the muscle like all along instead of waiting for the big catastrophic thing to happen so that you can show up for your friends.
Sure. Man, I think so many of us don't want to ask for help. One, because we don't want to burden someone. You know, I have friends who are on the Enneagram, they're 2s, and so that's the nurturer, that's the helper. And so for them to ask for help is like a no-no. I can ask for help more. I'm a 7-8, and so it's much easier for me to ask for help than it would be for my friend, you know, who's a 2. Or the different stages of life. Like I think of my friends who are in the stages of life with like little bitties and they are so exhausted and really probably what they need is a long run. Or can you please just come to my house for 1 hour or take this baby off my hands for just a second. He's crying excessively. I'm so tired. And we don't ask for that. Or we have other listeners who have, you know, maybe other things. Maybe they're working or they have older kids. You know, we're all in different seasons. What would you say to someone who feels kind of what we talked about, feels this, I want to be included. I want to be a part of community. I haven't found it yet, whether it be because they're in a new place or a new situation, or maybe they have lived in the same town for 10 years and have never truly felt connected. What would you say that first step would be?
So I love this question. I want to go back to our Enneagram 2s, our servers, our givers, because I believe so passionately in this, that if you're like, no, really, I just want to help and I want to be a giver. And that's why asking for help is so hard for me. I want to tell you that beyond a shadow of a doubt, I just say this with so much conviction, the greatest gift that you can actually, if you really want to love people, if you really want to serve people, the number one greatest gift that you can give to your friends is asking for help. Because when you go first and ask for help, what that does, you are giving permission for them to ask you for help. If you are never asking for help, well, great, congratulations. You've actually kind of like become somebody who people probably subconsciously don't want to ask for help from. Like so just think of it like even, and you can see it so quickly that it's like, you know, even in this example that I gave you about my friend asking, just being like, I just want to go for a run. Who can take my girls for an hour and a half? Well, next time I'm like, I want a manicure. Do I need one? No. But like, I would love, I would love a night off. I know, me too. I would love a manicure. Who the heck do you think I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask my friend that reached out to me when she wanted to go on a run, right? Like, I'm not going to ask for the giver, because then I have my own story about like, they're always giving and I've asked for too much. I'm going to ask the person who gave me permission by her asking me first. And so to really reframe that, like, we have to get away from this narrative of being a burden, of really, it's really such like a capitalistic way of looking at relationships, of just like kind of deposits. I'm either making deposits or I am withdrawing from my social capital. And the reality is, I'm telling you, it's a wild thought, but I also, by the way, the vast majority of the world think more like what I'm about to say. Like, Americans are kind of, we're outliers in our mentality and mindset from a psychology standpoint. When you ask for help, you are making a deposit. You are not making a withdrawal. When you ask for help and when you go first, you are making a deposit in that relationship, in that sense of security, in that sense of, interdependence on one another. It is not a deposit. It's not a withdrawal. It's a deposit. And I also cannot emphasize how normal that is for so many people across the globe. So also getting out of our own little kind of ethnocentric way of showing up, which is very normal. You think the way you operate is normal, right? There was a huge thing in the psychology community probably about a decade ago where they realized that like the vast majority of studies on like psychological studies and social studies, like how do we interact and, you know, what does the average person do? Well, the vast majority of our research was coming from America, and then specifically from college campuses on America. Like, that's where so much psychology research was taking place. And so these two psychologists were like, this is interesting. Let's take all the data that's been collected, which, by the way, we didn't say this is how a 22-year-old upper middle class, upwardly mobile, educated American acts. We kind of just extrapolated it and been like, humans do this. And then they went around the world and basically replicated these tests in tons of different cultures across the globe and basically found America is such a far outlier. Like, no, this is not human behavior. This is very unique American behavior. So I do a ton of work globally. I know you know that. I've got, friends in tons of different countries, and I've had the incredible opportunity of really being like embedded into communities that are not, like the one that I grew up in. And just a couple months ago, I was talking with a friend who's Ugandan. She has 4 little girls. She's the CEO of a company. So she's like, we live these kind of parallel lives, but I'm here in America, and, she's in Uganda. So by the way, I'm also not talking about somebody who like lives in the village in the bush. It's like she lives in a city. She's raising 4 kids. She's really educated. She's really smart. She travels the world. But we were just talking about how I was kind of just like even trying to explain to her the shame that I even still feel now that I've practiced it, for decades. Yeah. I still feel that sense of like, oh, can I ask for help? And she was like, wow, that is so interesting. She was just like, and she said it so genuinely. She was just like, if one of my friends, or not even friends, honestly for her, it's like the neighbor that lives across the street. She was like, if my neighbor knew that I was stressing out because I had a meeting that was running late or I was stuck in jam and I couldn't get the girls from school. If somebody found out that I was kind of like stressing on my own about that and trying to figure it out instead of just reaching out and being like, hey, can you grab the girls from school? That would be a major social, she would be docked for that from a social standpoint. Like what would happen in her community is like the social sense would be like, who do you think you are? Like, what do you think? You're so big. You've got it so together that you don't need us and you don't need help and you're never going to have, like, it would literally be like it would be a ding. It would be arrogant. It would be very othering yourself. It would be really actually kind of like putting other people down. Like it would be equivalent to, I don't know, something we would all agree would like not get you great social credit in America. I don't know, like picking your neighbor's flowers and stomping on them on your sidewalk, whatever. Rude. It would be rude. And so even just to kind of acknowledge that of like, oh, this isn't a human thing. It's actually like our culture. Like we made up these rules. Yeah. The good part about that and what feels really empowering to me is that means we can redesign. Yeah. Like we're getting a certain outcome because we're prioritizing certain things, but we can change that. We can't do it on our own, but enough of us collectively changing it. And we don't have to change macro culture, right? Where it's like, even I'm thinking about my life. It's like, well, how many people, let's say it's a circle of 100 people, from my neighbors to my school, to my best friends, to my work community. It's like, if you can establish new cultures on a really small level, that is your world. So it will change the world.
That's so good. I want to move to Uganda. Like, I love, but I will say that I have been blessed with some friends who, you know, I have a group here in our neighborhood, and some of us work full time. Like, I'm an executive director of a, you know, anti-trafficking organization that has a lot of crisis. So sometimes we're supposed to meet every 2 weeks, and sometimes I'll be coming in hot, or I have to grab a kid at 8:30, and I'll be like, oh no, something happened at work, I got to go back up there. I'll meet you guys at 9. They know I haven't eaten, and I'll say, hey, do you guys have any snacks at your house? I haven't eaten. And I literally I have multiple friends in that group, but one of them especially will be like, okay, I have pot roast, I have like a lamb chop, and I have spaghetti. So which one would you want? She's like, how about I just bring you all 3, and I'll just, you know, plate them for you. And like, she literally brings me with my silverware and my thing. You know, I do feel that, but I also am not afraid to ask anymore. You know, I probably used to be, and now I think just for me in this lifestyle right now is like, I actually can't function without the help of somebody else kind of coming in and helping in this season of life.
And think about what a gift that is to that friend. Like, obviously it's a gift to you, but I don't know, maybe she's also a full-time working powerhouse, and she still somehow has spaghetti, pot roast, and all the things available.
She is a full-time working, but sometimes she has this is what I'm saying. It's like, she is that, but she also makes room for, you know, other things too. And maybe next week she wouldn't have that, and I would, because maybe I had some extra time that I was home and didn't have any big crisis happening and had a little extra time. So, you know, I think I have been a part of those communities and building those communities as well, and it matters so much. So I would say to the listener, like, if you want that, go after it. Like, ask the people into your home. It can be awkward at times. Like, I have asked.
Oh, it will be. It will. That is something that is like, can we stop with the narrative that it's going to be like the Friends theme song is playing in the background, and or the Cheers, you know, theme song. No, it takes about, like, social science would say, it takes about 200 hours. It's going to take about 200 hours to go from being a stranger to being the type of friend that you feel like you could call on for help. It's just like science. Like, and by the way, you're not that special. Like, you're probably not going to be able to shortcut it. So buckle up. 200 hours per friend. It's an investment. Do you want it? Go prioritize it, you know, and even too, that includes kind of those, like, I know we've all felt this, the like wasted investment, right? Where we're like, but we invested in this friend and then it didn't turn into that. And the reality is that it's easy to kind of get into that mentality. You know, it isn't the same as like building a house where you're like, but a brick goes on top of a brick, and as long as you keep doing the bricks, like, it is. We're people, and stuff isn't always going to work out. And so even going into it with that, of just knowing, like, man, if your vision is that in 10 years you have a handful of friends, you know, it's a numbers game. So 1, know that that's about 1,000 hours of time. 2, there's probably going to be about 15 people, if you want 5, that you're dating and that you're, you know, trying to. So but if we just start with that mentality, then when it doesn't work, or it doesn't feel like it's clicking, or we've invested in a friend and then they moved away, instead of just being like, well, this is confirmation bias that it's never going to work. Right. Instead, we're like, oh, okay, I knew one of these 15 was going to bite the dust. You just like set yourself up. So, you know, so much more. And, you know, and you also, every time you engage in relationship, you learn more about yourself. You learn more about what it takes to be in a committed, authentic relationship. And it's also not rocket science. Like, it is just a few principles, but it's having a level of commitment. And that also is nearly always going to feel really awkward in the beginning. You know, I have one of my kind of core communities. We are going on 20 years of friendship. And when we started 20 years ago, you know, I had this vision. I'm like, we're going to meet. Like, consistency and commitment is a huge piece of building these types of relationships. Like, you got to schedule it. You got to show up, and not just when it's convenient. Like, it's okay to say no to other things and to feel a sense of sacrifice for a relationship, because we sacrifice for things that we want and that we believe in and that we value. But I have to tell you, it was probably 6 months to a year where we just like sat in a circle and we're like, awkward. It was just awkward. It felt forced. It felt really uncomfortable. It felt really like, had to be really managed and heavy handed. In fact, Jess Honiger, my business partner, and I both kind of separately have cultivated similar communities. And now we're really excited about opening that up and trying to do that with and on behalf of other women. Specifically, right now, at least, we're starting with really high capacity female leaders who want friendship with other women who kind of have some level of shared experience. And just like setting the framework of going, this is what it looks like. And if you do these things for the next year, like, we're people, so you can't guarantee anything. Yeah. But the reality is, like, same with if you, like, if you exercise 3 to 5 times a week and you're actually consistent with it, here in a year, your body will look different. You will feel different. Relationship isn't that different. That what's different is that if you get on Google and you're like, hey, how do I get a 6-pack? There are 10 million people that are going to show you how to do it. And they're literally going to film themselves doing it. And like, we've accepted that that's something that you can be an expert in, and that then you can teach other people, and then they can mimic that, and then they can get those results for themselves. That, for some reason, feels really weird to us when it comes to connection and friendship and relationship, because we believe this BS that like, you either got it or you don't. Yeah. That comes to you or it doesn't, or it's embarrassing to need a little bit of extra support. And we want to just totally demystify that and be like, hey, if this is one of the most important things in your life, prioritize it, and also have a posture of going, it's okay if like you need a little help. You need somebody who can gather the people, who can kind of help you create a structure and a framework and some rules for engagement, like that. Name one other thing in your life that's good and that's important, that's worth investing in, that also isn't that. Yeah. Like, it's weird. Like, nothing else that you could name would be like, oh, I just am natural. That just naturally happened to me.
It's like, no,
you Googled the crap out of that. You like invested in it. You practiced it. Like, relationships are the same way. Friendship and community is the same way.
And work. Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think if I didn't have the community, diverse communities, and then like you said, like being a leader of an organization, like, it's lonely. It can be very lonely. And so to find people who, so lonely, who are doing similar work and able to share. I have a person I do that with, and it is like, it's a godsend. Like, we literally sometimes just call each other. I'm like in tears, like, I'm this HR problem, like, what is happening? Like, and I have to pretend like I'm great at work, but I am not great, and I'm not great. The ship is sinking. So it is so wonderful to have that. So I love that you guys are starting that and doing that. And I would just say to those who have that community already, there was a quote that Glennon Doyle said, and I don't know if she said it from someone else, probably she quoted it from someone else, but it was like that horseshoe effect. Instead of making that, circle where everyone's trying to peek in and get in, like that horseshoe effect where someone else can come in to that space too. And I think that's so important. We live in a town where people have lived here forever. They've gone to the same college. They've known each other for years and years and years. And sometimes it's hard to break into that. And so I would say, if you already have that community, like, look for others who need to be seen. It doesn't mean you need to bring in everybody. Everyone has their kind of groups, but that you're looking for those people too. So
there's also kind of, in our community, we started talking about, because there is a real rub of exclusivity and inclusivity when it comes to intimate and authentic relationships, right? So you can only truly be intimate and authentic and cultivate a certain level of trust with a certain amount of people. Absolutely. That's just the reality.
Yes.
However, my take on it is, if you have that, that doesn't mean you have to open up every circle and just like grow it into perpetuity, because I actually think there's different types and circles, and needs of community. But for that core kind of most intimate need that we do all have, you can also be a propagator. So you should actually, if you're not in a season of longing for a relationship, I would ask you the question of, how are you intentionally helping to support, to propagate it, to start it in other ways? Because you have a capacity and you have an ability to love people actually in a way, because you don't necessarily need that from them, right? So you actually are uniquely suited to serve in a posture of giving, which, really this was kind of the conversation that Jess and I had that's leading us to launching these connection cohorts, is What do you do once you get them? And this is our direct result of being like, okay, we actually have capacity. We could help other people create this, and we don't need to be on the inside. We want them to have their own, kind of like inside. And so you really are uniquely suited in different ways. So either I would just encourage you, like, if you're prioritizing it, it should look like building it, for yourself. And then if you're in a season where you're more maintaining and you're still sacrificing and prioritizing, but you don't necessarily need to be in a building mode, how could you use that energy that you spent during your building mode to be building, but maybe not building in a way that directly benefits you, which is honestly kind of just, pay it forward, people.
Yeah. I love it. Oh, I love you, Liz. Thank you so much for just helping us learn how to do all the things, collaborate, build community, connect. Those are all the things that we really have to have. And as women, we know that. And we've probably both lived in a season where we haven't had that. And then we've lived in seasons that we have. And the seasons that you have it are so sweet. And it takes work and it takes awkwardness and it takes all these things. But it's so, so worth it. Tell our listeners how they can connect with you, just how maybe if they want to hear more about just the loneliness epidemic and connection and all that, how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so the few main ways to connect with me are joining my email newsletter list. So you can just go to my website, which is lizboho.com. That's LIZBOHO.com, and join my email newsletter. You can also follow me on Instagram. I'm pretty active there at Liz Bohannon. And then you can also listen to Plucking Up, where you can hear me coming into your ears. And a lot of what we talk about on that show is how do we build lives of purpose and passion and impact. In addition to the actual episodes, we are launching a podcast club, so you can be a part of that to really kind of just build a little bit more community and engagement. So you can follow the show where all the shows are, you know how it goes, but join the email newsletter or follow me on Instagram to stay up to date on all the things.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Kristi.
I hope it won't be more years. I hope it's like, we do this again soon. I know we live far away, but anyway.
Agreed.
Thanks so much for being on.